Hey everybody, happy Sunday. I hope that wherever you are and whatever you are doing, you are having an amazing weekend. If you want to know what's going on behind me, then you will need to go and watch our chicken and garden update, which published a little bit earlier today on this very channel. So if you're watching this and you're going, what's all that then? Just watch the chicken and garden update. It will be easier. Today, I want to talk to you about quite a controversial subject, namely what's just happened in France. So the French government has essentially banned all short-haul flights that are between cities that are less than 2.5 hours away from each other by train. So basically, if you can get from point A to point B via high-speed train in 2.5 hours or less, then you're not allowed to fly there by a plane. Now, it's already upset some people because that regulation is seen by some as not being strict enough, i.e. they want to ban flights that are 3.5 hours or less in length, especially when there is a high-speed rail between the two cities in question. Other people think that the ban is too harsh and that, 2.5 hours by train is still a significant amount of time, and you can obviously get there a little more quickly on a plane. The reality, though, is that if you're flying by plane, you have to get to the airport, you have to check your bags, you have to go through security, and then you have to wait for a couple of hours before you then board the flight and go where you're going. And it's come to mind, particularly for me this week, because I have just got back from Los Angeles, where I was for 24 hours a guest of Volkswagen. The Volkswagen ID Buzz long wheelbase has just been revealed here in the US, and I was at that event, as was Michael, our cameraman. And rather than drive down in this, which is what we normally do, we decided to fly for this particular occasion. And the reason we decided to fly in this particular occasion is because our calendar wouldn't make it possible for us to drive. Now, we try and drive when possible because it's easier for us to fill this truck up with electrons and just go and have all of our camera gear and spares and things like that. But in order for us to get from where we are, west of Portland, all the way down to LA, it's effectively a 2-day drive there, and then it's a 2-day drive back. And because of the nature of the reveal event, there is things starting in the afternoon, going all the way through to Thursday evening, and then Friday morning all the way through until lunchtime. We would have had to have planned to be away from here for the best part of 5 or 6 days if we wanted to add in some flexibility in case we got held up on the road or there was an accident or something like that. And because we were filming a car review earlier this week, the Nissan Ariya, that's coming very soon on the channel, we didn't have the logistical space to drive, even though we try and drive when we can. I am curious, though, if you think that France's policy is something that should expand to more parts of the world. Is it something you would like to see adopted here in the US or maybe in Canada? Is it something that you would like to see in the UK? Is it something that you would like to see in other countries around the world? I think France is probably one of the better suited countries to enact this law because the French rail network is pretty darned good, and there are also good rail connections to other countries. You can get to the UK very quickly by train, you can get to Germany, you can get to Italy, Spain, all through France's national rail network, and then those trains just keep on travelling. Obviously, here in North America, the rail network's pretty terrible. Kate Walton-Elliott and I have both used the train to go between where she lives, up in Washington State, and where I live, here in Portland, Oregon. And we've quickly discovered that taking the train might be a pleasant, enjoyable experience, but it's very slow compared with driving. That said, if we had a proper high-speed rail network, such as the one in France or in some other European countries, or perhaps even a Japanese rail network, we would be able to get between each other's place of work or home or whatever you want to call it in probably 45 minutes or less if we had a really suitable high-speed rail network. And again, for me to go from Portland, Oregon down to LA, if we had bullet trains here on the Pacific coast, we could get from Portland, Oregon down to LA probably in, 4 hours, 5 hours if we were really lucky, just moving really quickly on high-speed rails and only stopping in super major cities along the way. That's a much more achievable alternative to air travel than this. You know, this is a 2-day trip by car, maximum speed of 70 miles an hour if you're driving in the limit. When you get into California, it's actually lower in Oregon. Most Oregon roads are kind of 55, 65 maximum speed limit. California, you can go a little bit faster. That's a very different proposition to doing 200, 300, 400 miles an hour on a train. And we are getting to the point now where those high speed networks are becoming increasingly practical. And while they are expensive to build, you have to make a value judgment, right? Yes, it might be expensive to invest in that technology, to invest in building the networks, to invest in the train tracks and installing all of them and making sure that it's all powered by electricity that's renewably generated and has a low carbon footprint. That's a very big upfront investment, but that's going to have to be far, far better for us all than continuing to use planes to make short-haul trips. You know, in an ideal world, maybe we should only be using airplanes to travel across oceans when, you know, the practicalities of taking a ship from, say, New York to the UK would just be kind of bizarre. But we also have to remind ourselves that it wasn't that long ago that was how people travelled. My mother, if you don't know, my mother's Canadian by birth, and she left Canada when she was 7, 8 and emigrated to the UK. And back then, she travelled from Canada to the UK, not by plane, but by boat. She travelled on a big ship. And, you know, that's in one lifetime. Someone went by boat from one country to another, and now people fly. Maybe we need to go back. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below as to whether you think we should start cracking down on short-haul flights. Here in the Pacific Northwest, a really kind of a commonly flown flight is from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, which, you know, on a good day you can drive between those two cities 3.5 hours quite easily. You can do it in less if you're speeding. I would love to see that replaced by, no, we're just going to use high-speed rail if you need to get between these two places. Because like I say, once it gets to 2.5 hours flight time, you really should be thinking of alternatives, because you have to get to the airport generally 2 hours before your flight, by which point you're almost there in a car, and frankly almost there on even a slow, smelly Pacific Northwest rail line like we have now. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below if it's something you think that we should be following France's lead, or do you think there are legitimate concerns that you have about impacts on business and tourism perhaps that travelling by plane helps solve? Or maybe you want to go a completely different way and say, you know what, we are pretty close to having very, very lightweight, energy dense battery packs that we can use in aviation, and maybe we should just say, okay, we'll let short haul flights happen, but only if they are powered by electric planes, or maybe in some circumstances hydrogen fuel cell planes, you know, perhaps where the range of the electric plane might not just be enough, maybe you use a hydrogen fuel cell plane instead. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I cannot wait to read them. And on that note, we are done with today's video. If you do have comments, leave them below, or you can leave them in our Discord chat room. You can reach out to us on Mastodon, or if you're a Patreon supporter, you can put something in the Patreon comments there as well. If you want more, subscribe, hit the bell, and follow the links below to regularly support us with a YouTube channel membership or a Patreon subscription. You'll also find links to our Bitcoin, Ko-fi, and Swag store, as well as that aforementioned Mastodon server. Scrolling on my right is the list of amazing charged up supporters, and shout outs go out to our V2G Patreon supporters. They are Pedro Mura Pinheiro, Alan Tupper, Andrew Martin, Bennett Elder, Brophy Wolf, Chris Maxwell, Cyprian Laplace, Dan Blair, Gordon C, Hey Esker, John Tramal, Carl Fox, Mark Eggleton, Peter Dillinger, Regine Fallows, Sean Tucker, Stefan Fremgen, Stephen Williams, Taslet in the Gong, Paul Bricknell, Tony Moss, Kyle Hodgson, Chris Centaur, Denny Hyde, Lance Schlall, Linda Irish, Mike Weeder, and Paul Nelson. And finally, big thanks to our off-grid supporters. They are Paul Conway, Kevin Burrowbridge, Stephen O'Donoghue, Jim Burness, Robert Flannery, Aaron Hahn, Ellery Hensley, Rory Litwin, JP Fagerback, Dave Kitchen, Andrew Glenn, Anonymous Freak, Chris and Michael Johnson, Clay Witt, CPU Freak 101, Eric Knack, Joe Bresney, Joe Hughes, John Henderson, Laura Reynolds, Marcel Ward, Matthew Drobnak, Nigel S, Reggie Watts, Will Graylin, and of course, Ian. Don't forget that we make content on our main channel every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Saturday. And then on a Sunday, come over here to Transport Evolved Take 2 to enjoy our Sunday Musing, which is what you've just watched, and our Chicken and Garden update, which if you haven't watched it yet, it's time you go and watch that next. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And as always, keep evolving.